the corner of your eye, huddled in the darkest shadows of imagination, it waits. Now is the time to face the fear. Welcome to Horror Lasagna. Embrace the trepidation.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I don't know that at any point in time we actually say who we are. I mean, not like an introduction, but like,
Oh,
hey, it's
yeah,
Reese, that kind of.
yeah, you're right. The first episode we did an intro, kind of who we are, why we want to do this, but it hasn't changed.
That's
So,
true.
so who are you?
I'm Reese.
I know singing of the Who there,
No,
and I'm Steven, and we're here for our ninth episode
indeed.
now of horror lasagna. We're doing the loved ones this time.
Yep, the
Uh,
loved
so
ones.
we went really dark and got lighter and lighter and funny. And we don't want people to forget that horror does not mean comedy all the time. So we went with the loved ones before a last comedy one. So
That's right.
give us the scoop on this movie there, Reese.
This movie is an Australian film from 2009. Uh, Australian. Now, I hate saying this because I haven't seen all Australian slasher films, but it's been my experience that Australian slasher films, like the bad guy in them, is never some masked, never some supernatural, never some super powered individual. It's just some crazy person with a lot of determination.
Somebody with a flip switch in their brain.
Yes. And a lot of times they're based on true stories. um, like really based on true stories, not like La Casa Muda where we're saying, oh, this was based on a true story and yeah, it's an urban legend. Like Wolf Creek is based on an actual guy who used to hunt down people who are hiking in the outback. That's just what he did. So, um,
Everybody needs a hobby.
that's right. The Loved Ones is not based on an actual incident, but it's based very much on the works of Jeffrey Dahmer and John Wayne Gacy. So, um, we've got that going for us just for a little additional authenticity.
There you go. And you said something particularly about that, what the director made the cast do beforehand.
Yes. He when the cast like was all accepted and they were all set, he made them watch Misery, Natural Born Killers, the collected works of Quentin Tarantino, and he made them research uh, Jeffrey Dahmer and John Wayne Gacy so they could really, really get into either what they were going to be doing to people or what was going to be happening to them. So
Yeah.
he was,
And those movies, I've seen those movies. I think I watched Natural Born Killers with you back in the day, maybe. But Misery is disturbing. The book is really disturbing. You know, you got the famous foot breaking scene.
yeah,
And then Natural Born Killers, they're psycho, and it's got some very disturbing stuff. It was an I think it kind of broke the mold for its time for psychological uh, thriller horror type stuff.
yeah,
Uh, for popularity, there hadn't been a lot before that. That kind of made people sit up and notice. This takes it totally in another level, another direction almost.
yeah, it's true. And one of the things that I think this movie does so well is you'll be watching it and there are elements of like dark horror comedy in it, and you'll see
Yeah.
something and you'll kind of chuckle about it. And then later on in the movie, if you're paying attention, you'll see why someone did what they did, and it's not funny anymore.
Yeah, I told you that when I said, oh yeah, it looks like it's one of those like 70s teen slasher parody or something like that, and I'm like, yeah, okay, it wasn't.
No, not at all. It just has that feel at times. So,
Yeah,
it was written and directed by Sean Byrne, who his CV isn't really long. He doesn't like have a giant list of movies. He has another movie called The Devil's Candy, which I've seen. Um, and while that movie I thought started kind of slowly and got better as you watched it, The Loved Ones is not like that. The Loved Ones jumps right into it with both feet. It stars Xavier Samuel, who plays Brent in this movie, and he was in Twilight, the one of the Twilight movies, Eclipse, and he was also one of the soldiers in Fury, which was uh, Brad Pitt's World War II piece with the tank crew.
which was really
Yeah, it
good.
was a good
Good
movie.
movie.
So he was in.
But I mean, considering you're talking about a vampire werewolf movie and a war movie where pretty much everyone dies, this is still 10 times worse than
It's
the
true.
movie.
Robin McLeavy plays Lola. Also, sometimes she's listed as Princess, depending on where you're looking things up. The only other movie that I found that she was in that you might know was she was in Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, which I have not
Oh
seen, but
no, neither have I
she
yet.
was in that. She does an amazing job.
Yeah, maybe too well because maybe nobody wanted to work with her after this.
It's true. Her dad's name, the guy who plays her dad in the movie, is played by John Brumpton, and he's got 101 films to his name, and most of them I don't recognize. But when you see the guy on screen, he just looks. You're like, oh my god, I know I've seen this guy in something, but I could not come up with anything.
Everything got reset. So okay, so I can splice that, not a problem. But you were talking about the dad.
Yeah, John Brumpton plays the father. He has 101 films to his credit. And when you look at him, he looks like a guy, and you're like, I've seen him somewhere, but I've never seen any other movie he's been in. So
He's acting like someone you know.
he is, yeah. This movie was nominated for 11 awards, and it won two. Well, one of them at the Toronto International Film Festival, and one at a place called Girardmer Film Festival. It's in France. That film festival actually specializes in like bizarre horror movie kind of things. So
Nice. I'm glad they got an awards for that. That's
yeah,
great.
yeah. The soundtrack also introduced me to Casey Chambers. This is another one of those movies that I watched, and I was like, "Wow, I like that lady's voice," and so I picked up the album. The specific song is like is Lola's theme song. Am I not pretty enough? But that was the song that I was like, I love that song. So I don't know what that says. That
About you.
yes, Psycho Killers. We enjoy our music. It came to the United States and it toured film festivals like the Toronto International and South by Southwest. But it only got a theatrical release in 6 U.S. cities, and even that was a limited run. So it's hard to say. You can't find how much money it grossed because who knows? And it was shot in a mere 4 weeks, which
Okay.
I thought was kind of fascinating.
It is limited in the settings. They don't use a lot of all over the place. There's a couple
No,
main
they
ones.
don't. It's pretty
So
much just backwoods Australia. Um, I mentioned Wolf Creek as another famous slasher movie. John Jarrett, who plays the killer in Wolf Creek, was offered the role of Daddy, and he turned it down because he didn't want to end up being typecast from then on out.
and has he done anything since then?
Wolf Creek 2?
Oh, okay. So don't want to be typecast. He's landing many great roles.
Yeah, yeah. There's uh Yeah, okay. The last two notes I have, we'll get to when we get to it in the story because I don't want to
Okay.
give anything away. Again, spoiler
Yeah.
alert,
Yeah.
we're covering the whole movie, but I don't want to spoil my own spoilers. So,
No, right. And, you know, we'll make sure we do on the 9th episode that we tell people there's spoilers. I think we have
right.
earlier, though. But
Yes,
anyway,
we have a couple times.
yeah.
Um, the movie begins with Brent and his dad, and they're riding down the road listening to music, and they're having a great time. Brent's driving, they're just goofing around. His dad lights up a cigarette. Um, and he and Brent are talking. His dad looks out the window and says something, and Brent looks up, and there's this shirtless guy. He's got blood on his face and a bloody heart on his chest, and he's just walking down the road. And Brent swerves to miss him, loses control. New driver, dirt road, loses control, hits a tree, and his dad ends up being killed.
Yeah,
And
and then
that's how
but
the movie starts.
I liked because they didn't make it explicit with ambulance and blood. It was like you suspected it because you know how these movies work, but it wasn't until later it was confirmed. I liked that a lot. But the beginning here gave me a zombie feel. I
Yeah,
mean,
it
you
did,
didn't know what
because
that
the
guy
way the guy
was.
was walking.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, and that guy becomes super important later on,
yeah.
ironically.
It's very very well done in this way.
Yeah. Um, the movie then jumps to 6 months in the future, and we're in the high school. Brent's there hanging out with his buddy Jamie, and Jamie's helping him get the hookup on some weed in a little bag. Um, and this girl comes walking down the hall, like definite goth girl, but like even there was even like camera slow down a little bit as she went by.
Yeah,
She
and the
is the
music,
yes, she is the hot girl walking down the hall. Her name
and
is Mia.
this is where it really starts getting that teen slasher vibe
Right.
at the beginning. It's kind of, I think in some ways they may have done that on purpose to give you this sense and then totally left turn it and make you
Yeah.
whoa.
Rip the
So
carpet out from under you.
yeah, absolutely.
She's getting in her locker and she walks off, and Jamie really wants to ask her to their formal dance. Um, and he's too scared. And Brent finally convinces him that he can go do it. And so Jamie runs around the corner. And then the next thing you know, Jamie comes back and he's like, yes, she said yes. And he's all excited. And it does feel like, haha, way to go, buddy, kind of
Right.
thing. And that sets up right there two of the stories that are told in this movie,
Yeah.
which I think is really kind of cool. Um, After that, this really kind of mousy girl comes up to Brent, and she gets like really close to him, awkwardly close to him, and she asks him if he'll go with her to the formal dance. And he's nice about it. He's not a jerk, but he's like, I'm going with Holly. Um, and then he leaves, and she's just standing in the hall. And you can tell from looking at her, she is upset by this.
Yeah.
And not like upset, like crying upset, like mad
Like
upset.
if this was Firestarter, things would be burning right now.
Yes, exactly.
Or if it was Carrie, psychonetic blood would just flow everywhere.
Right. Brent walks out of the school and his girlfriend Holly is waiting for him. She seems really nice. They head out to her car and start to fool around. He takes his shirt off and he's wearing a chain necklace with a razor blade on it. And then the camera pans to his arm and you can see he's been cutting. Um, and like she, goes to her face and she's a little disturbed by that, but it doesn't last long. They proceed to
Right.
have sex in the car.
Yeah. And she loses her shirt. So I'm like, well, she's going to die. We'll just hold that thought for a while.
Yeah. Then the camera pans out to the window, and Lola, the girl who just asked him to the formal dance, is standing outside watching them have sex in her car.
And we're no longer in teen slasher territory.
Right. It's yeah, because it's weird because just her standing there, her presence alone is a little disturbing, but like the look she's giving. The other thing that I find a little difficult to grasp is that Holly drives a Volkswagen Bug, and they seem to have they have a lot of range of motion in there for as small as the cockpit of that car should be.
They're young, they're agile.
So Holly drives him home, and okay, I'm gonna have to pause for a second. Thanks.
I won't move. That way the edit will
You're
go
you're welcome to move. I'm gonna have to send an email real quick.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. Well, while we were down, I had to answer a phone call. So
This is about school.
I thought you were done with
Price.
school.
Do. All right,
So
done.
what I'm going to do is like get a pose like this, and then it'll like jump from something normal to this thing, and it'll be very disturbing. So anyway,
Okay. Yeah. So we were talking about
Lola
Lola
watching him in the
watching them.
car.
Yes. Holly drops him off a short distance away from his house and asks if he's told his mom that she's gotten her license. And he says he hasn't. So she assumes she should pick him up at the same place. And he's like, no, she's got to get used to it sometime. And I can kind of see this where the mom would be nervous about other teen drivers as he was a teen driver and she
Right.
just lost her husband.
Yep. Yep.
She says she'll pick him up at 7. They kiss goodbye and she tells him that she loves him and he gives her a second kiss and doesn't say he loves her back, which seems to disappoint her a little bit. As he's leaving, he mentions that Lola asked him to the dance, and she says maybe he should go with her if she doesn't mind an emotionally stunted boyfriend,
Yeah.
which I thought was, that's a good one.
Pretty
Nicely
good.
done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's our first real indicator that something happened. The dad obviously died.
Yes.
So, and he's messed up.
Right. He goes in and tells his mom that Holly has her license, and she says, I'll call you a cab. And he's like, you don't trust cars. You don't trust cars driven by inexperienced drivers. So you're saying that dad being dead is my fault. And right there, in case it wasn't clear enough yet, they're hammering it home right here.
Right. And
Um,
it's interesting too, because, psychologically they'll talk about it and tell you, these people need to get some closure and need to move on with their lives. And they obviously haven't.
right.
So it is almost like, in some ways, it seems like the movie's saying this is why he gets targeted. It's kind of like the crazy person finds the one with the most psychological problems.
Yeah. And here we are, I don't know, probably 18 minutes into the movie, and we have the third leg, the third story that's going to be told over the course of this movie. He gets mad and he leaves the house with his dog and goes walking off. And he goes up to this place with a cliff. And he's going to climb up the cliff, but he takes like the toughest route. Like you can stand back as he's approaching the cliff. I'm like, you could just go around there to the left and just walk up it.
Like the dog did.
Right, like the dog did, but he purposely goes to the hardest part and starts climbing up. While he's doing this, they do this really cool thing, which again is setting the pace for things to come. It goes from this emotionally intense thing for him, and they intercut this scene of Holly getting ready for the dance. And she's happy and having a good time, and he's all stormy. So they do this thing where they cut back and forth with the contrast throughout the whole
Yeah.
movie. I shouldn't say they burn. The director does this thing as so he's climbing up this cliff and he gets to this one spot and like almost falls. But he catches himself and he struggles with it and like pulls himself to the top of the cliff. And it's like he has this realization he actually wants to live.
Yep. And it's very symbolic also of overcoming that mountain.
Yes, overcoming adversity. Yeah.
Yeah.
He finishes the climb and he lays down on the ground and with his dog and he burns a little weed. That's
And
he's got his little pipe and he's
yeah, might be
hanging out
illegal.
there.
It might be legal in Australia, so.
In 2009, I doubt it was, but it might be now. I'd be
Yeah, I don't
surprised if
know.
it's not. It's also while he's laying there on the ground smoking. It's interspersed with his mom standing alone, looking out a window, smoking a cigarette. His mom decides to give him a call, and as she's calling him, this mysterious figure shows up and gasses him with like a rag soaked in chloroform or something.
Yeah.
So he doesn't get to answer the phone. He gets knocked out and drug away. Now we go to the story of Jamie and Mia, at least for a little bit. Jamie stops to pick up Mia, and she's like your traditional goth chick, stereotypical goth chick. She's in a hurry to go, but her mom comes out and yells to her dad that he's here. And Jamie's trying to be like great to the parents and everything, and Mia just wants to bail. And the mom comes out, and dad wants a photo, but dad's wearing a uniform, and we
Yeah.
realize that dad's a cop. So we can see why Jamie wants to be polite and why Mia might have an issue with that.
And I swear, this is like the most awkward date pickup ever.
Yes.
Jamie's really trying. I mean, he's saying stuff, and it's just everything's going against him, falling flat.
Kudos to Jamie through this movie. He tries so hard.
Oh, he does. He really wants this to be a real good date, and it really seems like Mia's just. It was better than staying at home, so why not? You know?
Yeah. The picture gets taken and the kids take off. Then we see Brent's mom. She's wandered out into the wilderness to look for him, and she can't find him. When Holly shows up to pick him up, um, she and his mom like compare notes and realize neither one of them know where he's at. So again, you have this kind of happy thing going on. I mean, bizarre but happy, and then this morose thing happening. We go back to the happy, funny part. Jamie and Mia are driving along, and she asks him if he has any weed on him, and he makes some joke, and she's like, "You're expecting oral sex tonight or something?"
Yeah,
And he's like, super awkward about it.
yeah. I love Jamie obviously because he's a very uh, less than confident nerd on a date. So I can relate. You know, it's good to relate to characters in movies.
There you go. Um, then out of nowhere, there's this odd scene that's interjected where somebody stops to buy a bucket of chicken. You're just like, okay. Then we go we go back to Brent's house. And his mom and Holly are there and they're concerned. But they get more concerned when his dog shows up and he's been stabbed.
Hurt. He's whining and crawling, and it's like, oh man, you always feel worse for the animals.
Yeah, absolutely. Holly takes the dog and tries to get him to a vet, but he dies on the way. So,
Which is like the death knell for movies. You know, if anything will kill a movie, it's killing the dog. At least in America, you know that John Wick. That's all they ever bugged Keanu Reeves about was the dog died in the first movie, which
yeah.
arguably the dog kind of needed to for the story. I'm not saying they should kill dogs and animals, but for that story, it was what prompted them a lot. That was the only thing. But and then in this, the dog dies. It's like you just feel like, oh my god, I can't believe it. But she gets upset and she's just sitting there. It's a very emotional scene, and it makes you wonder what's going to happen to the owner of the dog.
Yes. Yeah. Um, Brent's mom calls Jamie's dad. Not Jamie's dad, calls Mia's dad because Mia's dad is a cop. And he answers the phone and he and his wife share a look like it's Brent's mom again. And it looks like there was something between them or something while they're talking on the phone. There's obviously some sort of connection and tension between them.
Yeah,
But you don't really know what it is. And so the first time I saw it, I was like, "Ooh, did they like have a thing or something?" Or
yeah.
so. But it leaves this little bizarre mystery.
I also thought that possibly they were trying to convey that she does this all the time, and they don't completely care or believe her anymore too. Because obviously, if you look at her, it looks like her whole life is a wreck. I mean, she's she's
Yeah,
wasted and
the house is dark.
yeah, never happy. So
Yeah. Um, Jamie and Mia get to the dance, and Mia looks super excited to be there.
yeah,
Not
very.
really. In fact, she makes absolutely no move to get out of the car. Then we come to this white El Camino. And this white El Camino is the one that stopped to get chicken. We've seen it driving down the road on a couple times, and it's driving through the dark, and there's a dead wallaby on the side of the road. And the El Camino stops. The door opens, a hand reaches out, grabs the dead wallaby, and puts it in the car. Which, again, very humorous concept.
Yeah, yeah, it's humorous, but with a little bit of Texas Chainsaw going on there.
Yeah. They're headed somewhere remote. The truck stops, and out comes Lola's dad. And Lola comes out, and they pull the tarp back, and there is Brent, passed out in the bed of the truck. At first, Lola's worried that he's dead. And she like yells at her dad, and it turns out that Brent's fine. He's just still unconscious. You're like, wow, that's just a little twisted.
She wanted that date so bad.
She did. So there's this. The next scene is Lola sitting in her room, and she has a scrapbook, of course.
Yeah.
And she's listening to Casey Chambers sing that lovely song. And she's like flipping through it, and it has all of these boys in it that like apparently she's loved over the years, I guess. And her dad comes in with a prom dress and dress shoes for her, and she's thrilled and wants to try it on immediately and wants his opinion. So she makes him stand there while she's getting changed, and he looks super uncomfortable as it's happening.
I mean, do you blame him?
Oh no, no,
Yeah.
no. The relationship between the two of them is beyond just odd. It's
It
kind of
is
disgusting at times.
super bizarre. And I mean, right here, it really looks like Lola's the aggressive and in charge, and the father is just very subversive and whatever she wants, whatever she says, which doesn't make him quite all right in the head either, obviously.
Yeah. He tells her that she's pretty as a picture, and then the camera cuts to Brent in a tuxedo, tied up to a chair, which is bolted to the floor in the kitchen or the
Yeah.
dining room of this house. Sitting across from him is Daddy, and Lola comes into the frame wearing her prom dress. He looks to his right, and there's a woman sitting at the table, and she has a scar on her forehead. And that's when he realizes that he's tied up and the chair's bolted to the floor.
And it's not just a scar; it almost looks like a bullet hole. I
Yeah,
mean, I was like, is she like Wolverine? She's been shot in the head and
that's right.
pushed it back out.
Yeah, yeah. Um, then there's this whole almost ceremonial thing where Lola fills a syringe with bleach. And then her dad holds Brent's head as she injects it directly into his vocal cords in his throat. And he cannot talk anymore. In fact, I think it's noted that it's at 27 minutes in the film. The actor has no more lines to say from there on out.
Can you imagine? They're like, okay, here's everyone's like lines for the movie. Lola gets this big thick thing, and he gets handed one piece of paper.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Here you go, Xavier. Here's your.
Think
That's
you can
gonna have
handle
a.
that?
Yeah. Honestly, I don't think I would have wanted to do his role. Just in general, he gets the snot kicked out of him a lot in this film.
He's tough as hell, though. But
He is. So he can't speak anymore, and uh, then she like gets down next to him, and her dad takes a picture, like it's a formal dance, and she and her dad are acting like this is normal. He wants one with her mom, who we find out is, I think they call her Bright
Bright
Eyes.
Eyes, yeah, like she's a
Yes,
dog.
they want her in the picture, and she goes to sit in the picture, and he goes to take the picture, and Lola purposely pulls her hair because she's sadistic and she hates her. So he takes the picture, and then he's like, kind of chastises her about, oh, it's just a flash. It's nothing to worry about, not realizing
Yeah.
she was freaking out because Lola was being an absolute bitch.
And one of the things when they inject the bleach and he's like kind of gargling, screaming, they start yelling, "We can't hear you!" and they're laughing
Yeah.
about it. And
Yep.
I
Yep.
got
Yep.
a point for that later, but obviously they're teasing him.
Yeah, they are. And a lot of what they do that you see happen are things that Jeffrey Dahmer used to do to his victims. The bleach to the vocal cords kind of thing.
If
So,
people are watching all 10 of these movies and they don't have trouble sleeping, I would be concerned because seriously, with some of the other messed up stuff, this one was just as messed up as Martyrs or any of the other stuff we've watched.
And on one hand, it might have even been worse because, like in Martyrs, it's in a movie, but I've never ever heard of that actually happening to anybody. But the
True.
things that they do to Brent in this movie happened 30 years ago.
Yeah.
So, like a bunch of people. I mean, so that makes it just a little more disturbing in my eyes.
Right. I agree. I definitely would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And then just to break the tension, here's Jamie and Mia. They still haven't gone into the dance. They're thrashing out to speed metal and smoking weed in his car.
It seems like a great date for goth chick. She seems
Yeah.
pretty happy. And hey, Jamie's got a date, so he seems pretty
Thrilled with the
fairly
super hot
good.
chick. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh,
So
and
one thing I think we skipped over earlier in Mia's room, not Mia, Lola's room, they showed all the dolls. They did a pan scene among the dolls, and these are like tons of dolls. Obviously dolls look creepy at times, but these are in like various sex positions, and they're like they got little marks on them for blood and all sorts of things. So that's in
yeah,
her room right before the
yeah, yeah, yeah.
scrapbook. So
As opposed to Brent's room, which has like Metallica posters on the wall and
right,
like music festival posters up and things like that.
yeah,
Um, it's a nice contrast between the two
right.
because Lola's at first glance might look like this, pretty little prissy girl kind of thing, but then when you get into the details of it, it's really not.
Right. And I
You know,
wonder what attracts her to this boy and the other boys that were in her scrapbook. What was it? Something? I don't know.
I will say this: Xavier Samuel is an incredibly handsome guy.
Yeah, he's good looking, long,
So
curly hair.
yeah,
Yeah.
and that like his jawline is impeccable. So I get that. Okay.
I still think it's the psychological thing. He's wounded, he's scarred, he's vulnerable. I think
It
that's what
very
gets her.
well could be. So after we see Jamie and Mia having a great time, we're back to Lola's house. And they're eating chicken. Well, Lola and her dad are eating chicken. Brent is working on loosening the ropes on his wrists secretly.
Yeah.
Um, Lola and her dad do this wishbone thing, and she gets upset when she loses, but he covers it over by saying that he wished for her to have like the best time ever, that kind of thing. Um,
And right
Lola,
here with the dad, I'm still thinking he's kind of scared of her. He's submissive to her. He doesn't know how to handle the situation. So whatever she wants to keep her happy. That's not necessarily my thoughts all the way through the movie, but at this point, that's what I'm still thinking.
and that's a really good point too, because I actually thought by the time the movie ended, I just had the feeling that this is the kind of behavior that he was practicing as well. It's
Yeah.
like something that's been passed down because all throughout the movie, like with the bleach and the stuff later with the drill, like he's precise about it. I mean,
Yeah.
he's got it down to a science.
And he's instructing her.
Yes, he's teaching her. He's passing on this tribal
Yeah.
knowledge of psycho killers. Um,
Oh,
Lola
you
tries to
gotta
feed.
laugh.
Yeah, yeah. Lola tries to feed Brent a chicken leg, and he's not going for it, and he won't eat it. So she looks to her dad, who grabs a hammer and just sets it on the table. And then Brent decides that he's going to try the chicken, which she keeps saying is it finger licking good, and she wants him to suck on his finger.
Yeah.
And he manages to
And
give.
this is
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
sorry. This is where I start going, oh, the dad's not so submissive because, man, he really gleefully picks up that hammer and gets this look in his eye and he's just waiting for it. He's excited and like, okay, he's not just a submissive little weakling. He's crazy, batshit
Yeah.
crazy.
Um, she wants him to suck on her finger, and he manages to whisper that he needs to use the bathroom, but she says not until he sucks on her finger. So he does, and she really seems to appreciate it, and her dad really seems to not.
Yeah.
Which, from Brent's point of view, would be a worrying thing, being tied up, strapped to a chair, and a guy with a hammer and all. Not to mention the psychotic girl in front of you.
Well, yeah, make her happy and the dad's unhappy. But is it better the other choices? None of these choices for poor Brett from here on out are good.
Yeah, yeah. She asks if he still needs to use the bathroom, and he says yes. So she just pulls out his penis, and a glass, and tells him to fill it up.
But she drinks the milk first, so
Yeah, we don't waste. When he can't, she says that he's lying. Are you telling Porky Pigs? Are you lying? And so she threatens to nail his penis to the chair if he doesn't start peeing in like 10 seconds, which for me probably would have been it.
Yeah.
It's already
Performance
weird enough,
anxiety.
but yeah, on command like that. And she starts to count down. At the last second, he manages. And she says it's crying. So he kicks her.
Right.
And he slips his ropes and he makes it outside.
Well, you want to be really disturbing for the podcast. She says it's crying, so she wants to kiss the tears away.
Yes.
And it's right in front of Dad. So
yes.
I mean, it's like, okay, let's just keep going from one disturbing scene to another, which then, talking about all the juxtaposition, the scene with the nerd and the goth chick smoking in the car instead of dancing seems like wholesome Andy Griffith type, down on the farm goodness compared to what's going on here.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where he gets out of the house, and he's using his razor blade to cut the ropes. He gets out of the house and I'm like, awesome. All right. And then I check the time code and I'm like, not all right. Daddy follows him out. It turns on the headlights of his truck. And, he's trying to look around and he goes to move his truck. Well, Brent was hiding underneath it. So he rolls out just in time, but the dad sees him and chases him down with the truck. And he climbs into a tree. Lola comes out with a flashlight and the dad's throwing rocks at him. And then Lola takes turns and they're just throwing rocks at him, having a good time. And eventually he gets hit and falls out of the tree, bounces off the hood of the truck and hits the ground.
Brett is the worst runaway from the bad stuff. It's again has those overtones of the old teen slasher flick. Because isn't that what you always joke about? Oh, I'm going to run and fall. I can run 20 million times, but now I'm going to fall. But he chooses the horrible spot. He runs to a tree in their yard. It's like, dude, it's dark out there. Just go through the weeds. Just keep going. Don't stop.
So I agree with you. However, the one thing I will say is they're in the outback of Australia.
Oh, no.
And there's no tree. Like, if you were here in, where we live, you could head for a small copse of trees and anyone in a car is not going to be able to follow you because the car is not going to go in between the trees.
Right.
Out there's nothing. I mean, it's all basically flat, hard pan kind of deserty stuff.
Right.
But yeah, hiding underneath the truck is a bad idea. That's the first thing he's going to get in. But
yeah, he had a head start. He could have taken off, gone around the house, and then at least they would have had to look for him a little bit. It gives them a chance to maybe find something to hide behind or elsewhere. And if they go a different direction, head off somewhere else. Up your odds at least.
Yeah.
Hiding 2 feet away from the door under the truck does not up your odds.
Yeah. They tie him back to the chair, and then the dad pounds steak knives through his feet into
not even
the floor.
Nails.
Yeah, steak knives.
That's gotta feel good.
Lola demands.
I think they were serrated too.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Why would
you
use a smooth blade?
Of course. We don't sound psychotic on this podcast at all.
Not at all. Lola demands that he cry, and he won't do it. The whole time the dad's pounding that. He just looks at her with like sheer, again, if this was Firestarter, the place would be in flames just from the glare that he's giving her.
Yeah.
Mia's dad goes out looking for Brent because Brent's mom had called and asked him to, and he finds his pipe and a smashed phone. And Holly is with his mom, and they're like bonding over this whole experience. I kind of got the feeling, that his mom was just didn't see Holly as like a real thing. Holly and Brent wasn't a real thing. It was just one more risk he was going to take by getting in the car with her and going to this thing. Um, but they're like they're really bonding over this, over him being missing, and how much Holly is helping Brent's mom get through this. Um, Mia's dad shows back up and like, here's the phone, here's the glass pipe. Obviously, something's happened.
Which I'll give the cop kudos here. He didn't start going off about smoking the weed and stuff. He actually was more concerned that, here the boy looks like he's missing.
So, yes, because in your typical horror movie, the cop's just going to blow this off, right?
Right.
But this cop actually has a reason to think that something fishy is up,
Yeah.
which we'll get to in a bit. Lola and her dad are going through her scrapbook of her past victims, and they have this heart carved into their chest.
That's where you really find out, oh, these are past victims, not just boys this girl was
Right.
into. So again, you got that whole, two-sided thing going on.
Right. Brent's not really paying that much attention until she gets to this page about the one who got away. And when he looks at it, he realizes it's the guy that he saw with the bloody face and the heart on his chest the day he got in the accident and killed his dad.
So we've come full circle.
We
His
have.
dad died, and you can kind of say it was Lola's fault.
You could, yes.
We don't find out what happened to that boy, but I felt bad for you because it said Reese is one of the boys in that scrapbook. I was like, oh man, too bad.
Yeah. Well, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Jamie and Mia are still burning down in the car. She accuses him of being sick of her because he wants to go inside. So she does the whole blowing weed smoke into his mouth. And you're still like, you know what? Jamie's having a much better formal dance night than Brent is.
Yeah, it may not be the creme de la creme of dates, but I get the feeling that this may be the best date he's ever been on.
Yeah.
It's got a girl, so I mean that's probably the best date he's ever been on.
And then we go from that back to Lola's house where she has completed drawing with air quotes, a heart on Brent's chest with a fork. Just basically jabbing over and over, making a heart in his chest. And then she and her dad take turns throwing salt onto his chest because
yeah,
that's how sadistic they are.
So if we're keeping track, so he's been gassed, tied up. He's been skewers through his feet, bleach to his larynx, and now carving on his chest with salt.
Yes.
So, I mean, if we're doing hey, let's take a drink every time Brett has something bad happen to him, we're getting really drunk on this one.
Okay, but on the upside, it's almost over.
Oh, okay, that's an upside.
So, the movie's not almost over, but the mutilation of Brent we're reaching the end of his mutilation stage.
Yeah, he got hit with a rock and fell out of a tree too.
That's true.
So,
yep. Yeah, that's true. Holly is in his room looking at a card that he bought for her, and in the card he tells her that he loves her, and he thanks her for putting him back together again. Some statement about all the king's horses. You've done what all the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't do.
Well, if she thought she had a hard job before, wait till this time.
Yeah. And his mom's sitting in the other room looking really worried. So we're going from that scene back to Jamie, and he's still trying to get Mia to go inside, but she now seems like she's super altered and like she wants nothing to do with him now. And if you've ever been in an altered state like that, you realize I just want to sit here until the world stops spinning around for a second. That's kind of the stage that she's at right now. Usually nothing good ever comes from that.
But actually, it's the best part of the movie, the highlight of the movie. They
Oh yeah, yeah.
And I'm thinking at this point, it's like, okay, how is their story going to intersect with what's going on? Because
right,
something's got to happen here.
It can't just be about pacing, right?
Right.
Lola is declared queen of the dance by her father. They blow noisemakers.
Oh, because they're dancing like very close and seductively for the
Yeah,
prom.
yeah,
Again, we can't just have a little bit of creepiness going on. It's
yeah. Daddy threatens Brent with a hammer when he won't blow the whistle. Then he gets crowned king, and Lola acts like she's all thrilled and excited about it. Jamie finally manages to get Mia into the dance, and they are dancing, but Mia's not really there mentally. I mean, you can tell from looking at her, she's not into
yeah.
this. As the dance continues, she just begins. She's got her hand on Jamie's cock through his pants, and everyone is watching because she's not being at all subtle about it.
And she wants them to
Oh
say,
yeah,
she wants to make them uncomfortable. She wants to basically say F you to everybody.
yeah. She calls them out for staring at him, and then the principal comes over, calls her out on it, and kicks him out of the dance,
And
which
his
is
word, oh, sorry, go ahead.
exactly what she wanted from the first place. She didn't want to be there.
Right, right. And I love his words. It's not like stop that, don't do that. It's like if you're going to do that, go elsewhere.
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
I don't want to see this. Brent and Lola are dancing as her dad throws glitter over them, which is kind of funny because, on the one hand, the knee jerk reaction is, oh, he's got her. He should do something. But we got to remember that his feet are still pounded with steak knives into the floor. So he's not actually dancing so much as just standing there while she sways back and forth.
He's probably in a little pain.
Yes.
In general.
She announces that the song is the one that she'll dance to at her wedding, but Brent's not going to be the groom. Then she dances with her dad. And there's this really disgusting kind of, you're the perfect man for me, daddy.
Yeah.
And this whole incestuous kind of gazing between the two of them.
Yeah.
As if they weren't disgusting enough as it is, right?
Right. Yeah. Sorry, I jumped that earlier. That's what the part I was talking about.
Yeah.
They do that. Yeah.
While they're doing this, making moony eyes at each other, Brent gets a razor necklace out of his pocket but drops it. He manages to pick it up, like he falls down or something to pick the razor back up. Mia's dad shows up at Holly's house, and it's not just, the neighborhood guy who happens to be a cop. Like, he is here as a policeman in official standing. And he's like, the search and rescue team will be out in the morning. Holly calls her mom, but her mom's not answering. And then she just ends up in Brent's room just crying.
Yeah.
So Lola takes that roadkill. Remember the haha funny joke about the dead wallaby and picking it up? She takes the roadkill. Her dad has just beheaded it. Then she goes over to the living room, and there's a set of Bilko doors in the living room under a carpet. And she opens them up into a pit in the living room. Screams come out of this pit. And they're pouring water down in and telling whatever's down there to sing for their supper.
Yeah. Now I actually, with all the screeches going on, number one, I thought, oh, they must have borrowed that from Mad Max, because that's just kind of what it made me think of. But I kept waiting for her and her dad to yell, "We can't hear you."
Well, they don't ever show you they don't show you actually what it is. And so
but
my
you
first
hear just
my
screeching.
first thought is, are we getting into something supernatural now?
Yeah, it's like the pit to hell. Cthulhu's coming out of the hole.
Yeah. Jamie and Mia seemingly drive off somewhere, and Mia is all over it, all over him. And then they start having sex, and there's a knock on the window, and it turns out they really didn't drive off anywhere. They're still at the school, and the principal shows up and tells them to get off of school property.
Right.
So
again, best date ever for Jamie.
Jamie's best date ever. Absolutely. Lola's dad comes out with a drill and gives her some last minute pointers on performing what is essentially a lobotomy.
Yeah. Well,
So
he doesn't want to break through into the brain. He just wants to drill the hole through the skull. So you got
just
to
through
put the
the
pressure
skull.
on, and you know as well as I do, you start drilling something, you get to that end, and suddenly,
Oh
you know,
yeah, yeah.
and they
You
don't
got to
want
be
that.
careful.
Yeah,
She
especially if it's a skull. I mean, geez, everybody knows that.
she tells Jamie that he will be her first. And her dad puts him in the headlock, and she approaches with the drill. When she goes to do it, and this is 110% accurate. If you're drilling and you hit a hard surface, if you're not careful, the drill bit's going to slide right off, which is exactly what happens. She goes, hits his forehead, goes through the skin, hits his skull, and the drill bit slides off to the side.
Which has to feel wonderful. I think that's a double drink if you're keeping track.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so she goes back in for a second time, and she gets it right. I mean, she drills a hole.
Yay, she got it right.
Well,
That's just, I mean, what's the scene is just, it's very, very dark humor to even be laughing about it, but it's very disturbing. It's one of the most disturbing movies.
so the funny thing about it is, up until now, I just kept thinking he's getting out of here. He's making it out of here. And then when she actually puts the hole in his head, I'm like, ooh, maybe he's not.
Yeah. At this point, I'm going, wow, this is falling way more into the psychotic thriller rather than the horror. It's gone so far beyond just. It's very horrific, yes,
Yes.
but I will take some Crimson Peak ghosts over this. I need a palate cleanser or something.
This is more along down the line of a Saw than it is a Shining.
And Saw is tame compared to this in many ways.
Brent has
Partly,
flash. Oh,
partly because it's a teenage girl. You know
oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
that makes it so much worse.
The whole kick-ass thing, right? With
Yeah,
Zoe Moritz, you know, chopping people down, adults like this little girl. It's the same kind of
yeah.
disturbing pairing and a lot of times that dissonance, that uncomfortable dissonance, is what makes a movie really disturbing and like lasts with you for a long time.
Very much so. And I made a note that unlike Martyrs, because we talked about that, how he did really well in Martyrs to make you question, who do I agree with? Who do I feel bad for? And you got to question yourself. And it's art. That's
Yeah,
what
that's
art
the
tries
point.
to do. In this, I don't feel bad for her dad at all.
No.
Not in any sense. I don't know what their background is, what the reason for any of this is. I don't feel any. So let me ask you this before we go on with the rest of the movie, because it's the friendship, relationship, buddy theme. Who are the buddies in this that you were thinking of when you chose it?
So, you have multiple layers of friends. On the one hand, you have Jamie and Brent.
Right.
They are very good friends. Then you have Brent and Holly, and they're very good friends. And then throughout the movie, all three friends are split apart and put in situations where they are not with their friends anymore.
Right.
And even in Jamie's case, as we'll get to eventually, it's not a good time for Jamie either. For
Right.
Jamie and Mia, Jamie is not Mia's friend,
Right.
and she is not doing this out of a desire to be his friend, you
Right.
know? So you have the friends, the actual friendship is only there for like the first 5 minutes of the movie. And then after that, you have these friends that are just
Oh.
split apart, and this is how their nights go across.
And that's kind of what the themes have been. You've mentioned a couple times with the movies. It shows the friends how they're different, but then how they get separated.
Yeah.
But arguably, the father daughter is a friendship, and it so lasts through the whole movie.
It's true. The friendship between Daddy and Lola is so disturbing, but so deep
Yeah,
and ingrained that it's not a friendship that's going to ever break asunder. You know what I mean?
no, yeah.
It's
I'm glad it was Australia. I swear to God, if this took place in Ohio, I'd be moving.
it's not unlike La Casa Muda, where the friends were her dad and his creepy buddy.
Right.
and all the nasty stuff that they used to get up to in that house, including with the girl whose dad was involved. You know what I mean?
Right. Right. Right.
They're friends, but they're not heroes,
Oh
kind
God,
of thing.
no.
Um, so
Okay.
she's put a hole in his head. He has flashbacks about all the people who are important in his life, and you hear a kettle going off, and he comes back with a pot and hands it to Lola, and she is supposed to pour boiling water through the hole into his head, which
As if we couldn't get more disturbing. I'm like, are you kidding me?
and it is a chemical way of initiating a prefrontal lobotomy. He will, and now you understand why Bright Eyes has that scar on her head and why she's so submissive and just sits there glassy eyed the whole time, because this is what's happened to her.
Because that was how Lola had to practice, had to get good at this. Is
Yes.
or did the dad do it? I wonder.
Well, she tells Brent that he's her first.
Oh,
So the
that's right.
dad
That's right.
must have done this to her.
Well, oh, good. I didn't even pick up on that. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jeez, oh man.
But again, this is actually something that Jeffrey Dahmer did to his victims.
See, I
So
didn't remember that, so it was more disturbing seeing it in the movie, I think.
yeah, it's the whole concept is, prefrontal lobotomy is pretty horrible, but like this is like well beyond the pale.
And here's the funny thing: earlier, the threat of the nail through the penis was like, oh, that's horrible. That seems like a walk in the park compared to everything else. I mean, come on,
Yeah.
seriously. No, it's mostly flesh. Spiking it, people do that because they want to. So that's the least horrific thing,
The
which
f-
makes me disturbed.
the funny thing is, in The Serpent and the Rainbow,
Oh yeah,
that was like the prime, that was like the top violent act,
yeah,
was the spike through the testicles. And here it's like, put that in the first third of the movie.
yeah. Because it's not that big a deal. We want to build up to the
Yeah,
horrific
we got to
stuff.
get above that.
Yeah.
So Lola goes to pour this into the hole in his head, and he's thrashing around, but her dad's got him in a headlock. Well, she goes to pour and she misses and hits her dad's arm with his scalding water.
Again, hints of comedy.
Yeah, just a bit. She complains that the hole's too small and asks her dad to bore it out a little bigger, which he does.
And okay, so I've had my teeth worked on, and you get that vibration going on sometimes in your whole head. Can you imagine the hole in your skull? And he's widening it. I mean, I
No.
it makes me ache just to think about yeah.
Um, while he's doing this, Brent gets through his ropes with the razor and cracks dad in the face with a razor, and it's a good cut.
Oh
I mean,
yeah.
you don't get like there's not like this long camera lingering on it, but you can see like flesh is hanging off to the side, and the father is just absolutely aghast at it, and
Oh
he's just
man.
standing there in shock.
Yep.
Um, so he then pulls the knives out of his own feet. This is a testament to like this guy's willpower. Pulls the knives out of his feet, and then he throws the drill at Daddy. And it's a great ploy when you throw something at somebody. 9 times out of 10, they're going to catch it. So he throws the drill at him and then follows up with one of those steak knives and stabs him repeatedly.
Which, yay! That's the thing. You always see these movies where people stab them once and walk away, and you're like, no, don't. They're gonna go get back up. And he doesn't stop. He's got a little bit of rage at this point.
Oh
So,
yeah,
if you've been following the drinking game, he got the hole drilled and widened. I hope you're sufficiently drunk for the rest of the movie.
right. Because everything else that happens, there's no more no more mutilation, at least
No,
on his end.
but
Lola goes to attack him, and as rightfully so, angry high school boy, he just lashes out and lays her out. He
yeah,
then pushes the daddy down into the hole, and the camera follows, and you see inside the hole are all of her old victims with
yes.
their lobotomy scars, with their hearts on their chests. And as soon as daddy hits the floor, they're on him and eating him.
And I thought the zombie movie from the first scene was like, oh, a zombie movie. Now it kind of is. And it just this whole movie, the fact that they're in this pit and in
Did you
the
get the
living
light?
room, and they're surviving this way. They keep them this way. She's this will give you nightmares. Just spoiler alert warnings.
Oh yeah, for sure. Trigger warning kind of thing.
Oh
This whole
yeah,
movie is one.
yeah. People want triggers. Here's a trigger. Let me tell you.
Yeah. Um, while he's watching this happen, she comes up and pushes Brent into the hole. So now he's down there with them as well. And then she closes him in down there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he's down there with them, trying to fend them off with a flashlight and a hammer.
He must have missed some secret items hidden somewhere before this happened in the
Yeah.
adventure game
Yeah,
version.
exactly. Now we go back to Jamie and Mia. We'll just leave him there in the dark.
Pause there.
Jamie brings Mia home. Her dad comes out to greet them, and Jamie's a bit scared. Mia goes inside, and Jamie
Well,
tries
because
to make light of it.
he just had sex with the cop's daughter while wasted and then drives home. So I'd probably be a lot nervous.
Yeah. So he tries to make a joke of it. And then we're back to Brent in the basement. Brent looks like he's the victor, which is not surprising because you have all these feral creatures that are wasted away and ill, you know. And then he looks and there's just bones everywhere, tons of bones all over the place, but no way out. At this point in time, Lolo decides to start checking off things on her bucket list. She goes in and smothers her mother to death.
Okay, next.
Yeah. Check. And at this point, it becomes important to note that technically Lola has only killed 2 people ever, which technically she's not a serial killer.
You need 3?
You need 3 or more. So
I'm glad somebody defined this.
yes.
That's about as disturbing as the rest of this movie is.
Yep.
Jeez, oh man, I didn't know that. Okay.
Now, here's the whole trump card to tie all of the 3 stories together. The last missing piece, Jamie and Mia. Mia goes walking into the house and then walks into a room and says something about, why won't it ever go away? And there's a picture on the desk, and the guy at the start with the heart on his chest and the blood on his face that Brent swerved to miss was her brother.
Yeah.
And so we know her brother went missing. We know her brother was dead now. And so now we see, there was communication between Brent's mom and Mia's dad, because Brent's mom was like the last tie to his son while, he was still alive at some point in time. So,
So let me point out here. We've made the comment before, a lot of times we don't like remakes, and a lot of foreign films that get remade in America we don't like as well. Right here is probably the reason why, because that bit and tying it all together in that story and weaving through everything, that's very powerful. And it's a very deep story in many ways, even with the just on the surface horror stuff. And I say on the surface because you could take a lot of that out and still have this story. It's just, this is what makes it the horror movie, and that's what people want to go see. But the problem is a lot of filmmakers miss the deep underlying story, and that's where this movie, it's got the horror and the all this going on, but it's got this story underneath, and that's what makes it such a full-fledged movie, in my opinion.
Regular old horror lasagna.
Horror lasagna. Boom.
There's this juxtaposition scene that happens next. We have Brent in the pit and Holly sitting on his bed, and she has a flashback and remembers something, and she calls Mia's dad saying, oh, you know what? Lola asked him to the dance. And now we know Mia's dad has just as much reason to want this thing solved, regardless whether it's Brent or not. This would be the person who did terrible things to his son.
Yep.
So he heads over to Lola's. and he looks in the window and sees blood all over the floor, pulls out his gun, just breaking and entering. I mean, and legit. I mean, there's blood on the floor. That's certainly enough warrant for a police officer to act. So he breaks in and with his gun out, and Brent's making as much noise as he can in the pit, having
Right.
bleach on his vocal cords.
Now, here's where I went, oh, wait a second. Come on. This is just doing something for the movie, because a cop would have radioed that in. A cop would have asked for backup. With that much blood, I wouldn't want to go in there regardless of what's going on. But when you tie it into the whole reason, he's didn't radio it in because he wants revenge.
That's
He's there
right.
for himself.
Yep. And it would have been really actually I don't want to say a completely different movie, but it would have been a different ending if what happened to him doesn't happen to him. You know?
Yeah.
If he
Yep.
would have actually gotten his piece, you could have rolled credits there and it would have been a great movie.
Yeah. But no.
But he goes in because he hears the noise in the pit, and as he's looking in with disbelief, Lola hits him with a hammer. I don't know,
Yeah.
something metallic on the end of a stick, and he falls into the pit.
Yeah. You've got a gun, man. Clear the room. Even I know that much. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he's done. I mean, however, what he has done is he's given Brent a gun.
Yeah.
Which Brent immediately just turns around and starts shooting.
Now, this is another scene where, Brent's not the action hero, because that gun only holds so many bullets, and he just starts firing, boom, 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 and they're all gone. It's like, yeah, you might have wanted to wait on that.
It's also important to note that in Australia in 2009, there are no guns.
Oh.
There's a complete gun ban in Australia.
Oh, I didn't even think of that.
Except for like hunting clubs and police officers in the military. So, he's never fired a handgun in his life.
Oh, wow. That actually makes me appreciate the story more, because how else would you get him a gun?
Yep.
Wow. That's awesome.
Lola grabs his necklace and says she's going to go kill his mom and Holly like he did to her daddy. And then she leaves.
Yeah, because that's she deserves revenge.
Yes, exactly what he did. And she just starts walking. And at first I was like, okay, that's a little ridiculous, because even if you are psychotic and angry, there's a vehicle there. But her dad's El Camino is smashed up against a tree.
Yeah.
But I don't know why she wouldn't take the cop car.
True.
Unless it's just that she's psychotic and angry.
Yeah, that's kind of what I push it off to. She's just so rage filled. But they also made a point of Holly getting her license earlier, so it didn't seem like all the kids got licenses and drove.
It's true.
That it was so she may have never driven. So it may have just
like
been
Brent's never shot.
Exactly, which shows he barely hit the ceiling.
Brent actually comes up with a brilliant plan. There's lots of dead bodies and body parts down in this pit, so he starts to build a pile so he can climb out.
Yeah, which, considering his runaway skills, that was pretty impressive, especially after all of this, that he can even think straight.
But he does go cliff climbing on occasions.
That's a true point too. Yep. I think cliff climbing's a little easier than dead body climbing, but I don't know. It might just be me.
So he's climbing out. Lola's walking down the middle of the street in her prom gown with a knife and her scrapbook. Of course. And she sees a car coming, and it's Holly coming down the road because Mia's dad's been gone too long. She's got to know what's going on. So she throws the scrapbook at the windshield. She hides herself on the side of the road and throws the scrapbook at the windshield, which doesn't damage the windshield, but it's enough to make Holly stop.
Right.
So Holly stops, and then what happens next is Lola opens the car door, and there is a very realistic, yet still pretty humorous fight scene between the two of them as they're fighting across the front bucket seats of a Volkswagen Bug.
Right. And now, right there, I caught something, and this is just me. It's not to diminish the movie whatsoever, but the one seat had some blood stains on it. So I think that they couldn't get that out in between takes.
Mm.
Before she even got in the car, there was blood stain. So, but that's just me catching a little something, and I don't want to diminish the movie in any way for that. But it's one of those little Easter egg, I guess, things.
And before you go thinking that Holly's just fighting to save her life, she notes that Lola has Brent's necklace on.
Yeah, she
And
sees
so she's mad too.
Yeah.
So the girls are fighting. Brent climbs out of the hole. He takes the cop's car and goes flying down the road. Holly, not having a weapon, is just running down the road.
And
And
she's
Lola,
faster than Lola, which is good.
don't have to be faster than the bear, just faster than you.
Right.
Lola's chasing after her with the knife. And as Brent's flying down the road, he sees Holly and swerves to miss her.
Very reminiscent of the whole beginning scene.
However, I can't imagine it's his experience because I doubt that he's driven since he killed his dad. Probably more to do with the quality of the vehicle he's driving. He does not really lose control of the car.
We'll chalk it up to a little experience, but he's had his head drilled into, so I don't know if that would have counted or kicked in.
Yeah. And, police cars are built for, high speed chases and things like that. So their suspension is so much better than you're going to have in a regular car.
True. Better tires, too.
Yep. He swerves around her, misses Holly, hits Lola.
Bam!
And here's another piece of dark comedy that doesn't actually need any kind of, here's a dark twist to it. Lola is using the knife to help herself crawl along the road to get him in the car.
Yeah.
It's so reminiscent of like Monty Python kind of thing, right? Your arm's off. It's just a flesh wound.
Right.
I mean, she's determined to get him. And
psychotic rage will keep you living forever.
And of course, what Brent's going to do. He's like, oh, you want to get to the car? Reverse. And there's this little blood splatter on the back part of the bumper where her head came off of it.
Which I thought was really well done, special effect. I mean, not a whole lot of special effects in this one, but that was a good
one. The best part of that whole scene is there's this brief second right before it cuts away where she realizes what's about to happen.
Yeah.
And it's like, there you go.
Good editing right there.
Yeah.
Because it worked really well. I didn't feel like it was jarring my eyes and figuring out what was going on.
Brent drives he and Holly home, and his mom runs out and hugs them both. Roll credits. And I just kept thinking, you're going to want to get that hole in your head looked at pretty soon there, bud, because...
I was thinking, Holly was so glad to see him at first, and then she notices and she gets a little. So how adjusted is this kid ever going to get again? I mean, where's he at? And they just end it. So
it's a long road to normal from there.
Oh God, yeah. It's like a lot of these movies, martyrs, we keep bringing up, but it leaves you with what happens. But that's not the story. What happened afterwards. So it ended really well.
It's really well done. The movie is super cringy, but it's meant to be. I mean, it's meant to like say, hey, no, this kind of stuff happens. And,
so there's your lesson. Don't go to prom. We should have learned that already.
That's actually a bit of contention right there. Because it gets mentioned as prom, at least somewhere in the script. But in Australia, they don't have prom. They have a formal dance. There's been a little contention over that. If you're going to pick something, you're digging deep if you're fighting over whether or not the word prom is in the local vernacular.
True. But didn't the dad and Lola say prom at the table?
Something like that. That's where it showed up.
Yeah.
But it's a brutal film for sure.
It really is.
And like I said, all of the things that you thought were funny, it turns out they really aren't,
Right. It's like the director knew what it seemed like and what these type of movies were. And he threw little things in there that would be a normal funny trope in a teen slasher movie from the 70s and 80s, but then skirted around it and made something very horrific.
Yep. Absolutely.
So my question is the title, The Loved Ones. Who is that referring to? Is what's your take on that?
Oh, well, Steve, it's obvious. The loved ones are all the ones living in the basement.
Oh, her past boyfriends.
Yes.
See, while I was watching the movie, I thought it was referring to the family. Oh, we're the loved ones, but we're psychotic killers. But as it came across with the kids. So I was just curious if you had any other take on that.
Actually, I didn't think of that until the second time I watched it. But she carves a heart into every one of them, and there's an L inside the heart. And so when you look at it, you're like, oh, okay, they're the loved ones. The loved ones are her pets that she keeps down in the cellar.
And what is love to a psychotic teenager? Baby,
don't hurt me.
Which it gives the title several deeper meaning than just what it could be on the surface. Again, like a lot of this movie. So okay, cool, man. So I know we've talked a little bit about season 2. I know that we're ending season 10 with a TV show.
Season 1.
Season 1. I'm sorry. Yep, season 1 with a comedy TV show. And I know you were getting the list. We're talking about season 2. So if people really like this, hey, we got more coming. And I know you wanted to get the worst movies out of the way. So everything's going to be pretty lighthearted and good from here on in. I know that, right?
That's really not the case.
Yeah, I figured that was it. I know you.
there were a couple times as we were going through this where I thought of one of the other movies on the other list. I was going to be like, oh, it's just like that scene in Audition. And then I'm like, oh, wait, we didn't watch that. Okay, I'm not going to say that then. So, yeah.
When we watch Audition, we'll cycle back.
Then we'll cycle back. Remember, we were talking about that dissonance? Yeah.
So there you go. We got one more show for season 10. So all these episodes we're hoping to get out before Halloween, because as of right now, it's still August for us. And then we were talking about season 2 that we want to get out sometime after that. So we got more movie watching. So I'm hoping people are enjoying this once they get out. We're talking as if they really have watched it already. But
Todd and the Book of Pure Evil is up next. And it is slapstick comic horror comedy, and it's a TV series. So I was starting to think about it, and I thought we'll probably just talk about it in broad strokes, because if we go through episode by episode, it'll be a 4-hour podcast.
Yeah, right.
So it would take us longer to describe each episode than it would just be for people to watch it.
Right. We'll do some overall everything.
Yeah. Then we can do an update, because I've been watching American remakes.
Oh, yeah, that's right. We could do a whole bonus episode. How's that?
Yeah, we can do that.
Cool. Yeah, okay. Maybe we can do that in between season 1 and 2.
Sure, a little teaser.
Yeah, there you go. And also, I mentioned Phantom of the Paradise to you. A movie that was recommended to me by Dean Haglund. It's a 70s rock opera in a way. It takes horror from several stories, Faust being one of them. But over the weekend when I did see Dean Haglund, so name drop, I got to talk with Dean Haglund, so I'm very happy about that. But anyway, I recommended to him to watch Suck because we were talking about comedy horror, so I recommended that to him. So in 2 or 3 years, if I get to see him again, I will follow up with that and see if he actually watched it.
Yeah.
Which would be cool. All right. Season 9 or episode 9, man, I think I should have been drinking while we were talking about
There you go. Maybe you have been.
I could have been. I don't know. So, all right, man.
All right.
See ya.
The creature slips from perception. Pay attention. It will rise again.